Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Game Junk Podcast, episode 206, recording on Sunday, September 15th, 2024. My name is Frank.
My name is Sean.
And my name is Andrew.
And on this week's show, we'll be talking about the big Unity news, rolling back some policies for licensing, juicy industry gossip, and getting a bit into what Metacritics, their value, who uses them. Do we rely on Metacritics too much? And Suda51's thoughts on this. Is that right, Sean? Did I get that right?
That's what sparked it. Yeah, you got it.
Just the coincidence that Suda had a game release this week and another one releasing next month that they're
Really
generating all this discussion. So how you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for covering me while I was away. I was unable to record last week due to being away and on a work trip. So thanks for covering.
No problem. We had to get some Astro Bot thoughts out there. Have you played it yet, Puck?
I have not. I also have not played Space Marine 2 yet. I had trouble downloading it, so I did not. I won a copy on my work trip, actually, which was exciting, but I did not get a chance to try it yet. I really want to.
People are saying Astro Bot is the perfect game.
Whoa.
Perfect. You know what? Let's do Metacritic stuff first. I saw an article, a headline, clickbait shit, like the perfect game does exist, and it was something with Astro Bot. So the Metacritic is 94, I believe, highest of the year, at least for major releases. It's now higher than Rebirth, which I still need to get back to. But this spawned kind of a discussion, and maybe the Metacritic of Lollipop Chainsaw, I'm assuming, or previous Metacritics for those. And Sean, why don't you fill in the listeners on this topic?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we were looking for something to talk about, came across this interesting headline, Suda51. The quote is, "Everyone cares too much about Metacritic scores." And I mean, just seeing that kind of struck a little bit of a chord with me, and I was curious to hear what he had to say. He was kind of taking it more from the side of developers and I guess publishers, like the idea of trying to play to what gets a good Metacritic score. And he basically says that, in some cases, there's almost a formula. Like people know what gets a good Metacritic score, so that's what they're tailoring their games towards. So, we're just getting a bit of repetition in terms of the big AAA releases. And obviously he comes from the side of like, he kind of is more like AA kind of interesting, unique games that don't really fit into like, an easy category or box. So I kind of see why he would feel that way. But yeah, I mean, I've always kind of said from the perspective of gamers and consumers, people are a little too focused on that, and we've talked about it before, comparing it to movies, where lots of movies come out, get terrible reviews, still do very well. People don't seem to pay that much attention to movie reviews, but game reviews people do. And I know part of it is it's just a bigger investment, $80, $90 game. You want to make sure you're getting something that is high quality. But do people miss out on good games because they see something like a 79? They're like, nope, not touching that. Like, that's probably an issue.
They definitely do. I mean, Binary Domain is a 74. So how many people have missed that gem? Like 100,000, let's say, 100 million. Everybody on the earth has missed that game. But I think it definitely is. When people look at it too closely, I think it can cause problems. But at the same time, it is just kind of an amalgamation of everyone's current reviews out there. Though there is like some weighting system, right, that gives certain outlets a higher weighting than others, I believe, towards the Metacritic score. I don't think it's a straight average.
I think it is.
Is it?
I think Rotten Tomatoes, I don't think either of them actually weight things. There might be a cumulative number, or certain platforms incorporate user reviews, but I could have swore Metacritic is just average.
Straight average?
Anyone who's verified.
I was going to say Rotten Tomatoes does have the top critics section. So like you have the overall Rotten Tomatoes score, but then you can click through and kind of see, okay, this is what like the cream of the crop critics think. It's not just, Joe Schmo who's got a podcast like us. But I don't know. I don't think Metacritic distinguishes like that.
I'm not sure, to be honest, but I'm kind of where Huck is. But I definitely have some, like, a different perspective. I think Metacritics are important. I don't think they're quite the same as movies when it comes to Metacritics. Games really don't invent all that much. Like Astro Bot is literally an updated version and using a lot of ideas from the 3D Mario games, specifically 3D World and 3D Land and some of Odyssey. It's hard to fail if you mimic a game like that. And then you get into these weird areas where some games get penalized for being too much like another game. And like I remember when Uncharted 1 came out, its Metacritic was relatively low for what the quality of the game I thought it was, because it's just Tomb Raider meets Gears of War. They've just cloned something else. So it can be useful because if the game doesn't succeed at cloning a game that's good, then it should have a low Metacritic. But if it successfully recreates or clones or reskins a popular genre, someone might like that game. And to me, it seems kind of arbitrary when it's penalized and when it isn't. The classic example I always bring up is, or value propositions as well, where the classic example is Ground Zeroes for Metal Gear getting like 85 and high Metacritics for a demo. Like, why were critics like so generous to that and then penalize other games that like The Order that are 6 hours long? Like, I don't get the difference. So there is a lot of subjectivity and a lot of probably I think there's a lot of journalism's giving the benefit of the doubt to certain publishers, certain developers, and certain advertising partners. So but when Metacritics are honest, I think they're really useful because most people can, within a certain genre that they're reviewing.
When you're saying Metacritic there, you're talking about individual reviews?
Even Metacritic,
to the Metacritic?
If a Metacritic is comprised of like genuine reviews, I think they're more useful and more objective than films. I think there's a lot of themes and ideas in films that are subjective. Games, a good game reviewer should know, like, okay, these mechanics feel good and there was no bugs. There's a lot more objectivity in game reviews. So I think they're more useful than Rotten Tomatoes, even though with the like algorithmic nature of films these days, they're almost becoming like, more objective, even though the films are becoming more boring as a result.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because obviously the types of games change and the sentiment around games change. Like you said, you brought up the game length, right? It used to be that if your game was short, it was shit. Now, if a game is short, it's good, or it can be good. Let's say, like Astro Bot, you guys were saying is 9 to 10 hours. Like that sounds perfect to me. But 10 years ago, they would have probably been roasted for only putting a 10-hour game in the window. So it goes with the swings and also like new genre types. Like MMOs were not really a thing, well, maybe 20 years ago now. So that's a whole new genre that how do you even review an MMO? How do you even if you were looking to join an MMO, how would you even know where to start? And I think Metacritic could probably give you a pretty decent starting spot to look at, good MMOs. But I mean, you would never really know how to, you would never update a review constantly as games are updated now, like how they're doing it. I mean, a game is never static anymore. I never buy a game almost ever, except for Cat Quest 3, right on launch day, because I know it's going to be updated. So all the bugs that reviewers complain about and knock it on, I almost never see those bugs because they're patched out by the time I get to it. And I have a great experience. I remember Andromeda was like that. Some Assassin's Creeds have been like that. People complain so much. I get to them, 6 months, a year down the road. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. It works fine for me. So
on that topic, feel obliged to bring up, I don't know why certain developers get penalized more for bugs than other ones. Like, Fallout 4, I fell through the world 3 times, and that didn't seem to be a problem with reviews, where Andromeda, because it's EA, get destroyed. So I play a game sometimes with people, guess the IGN score. And I can usually guess an IGN score pretty much based on reputation, what's been said about this game, and you don't even have to like read the review. You can almost guess what certain outlets are going to give it. And to me, it's more like a standard deviation thing. If I think they're going to give it a 6 and they give it an 8, I'm like, oh wow, that changes my opinion a lot more than what their actual review score is.
Yeah, I mean, like the issue of bugs and patching and stuff, like, there are some sites that just won't give a review score right off the bat. They'll wait, but like Metacritic itself doesn't do that. I mean, could be interesting if they allow you to update the score a year later or something like that. I mean, not everybody buys games day one, but I do think it's fair to penalize a company for putting out a crappy product on day one, even though everyone knows, yes, you're going to have time to fix that stuff. So it's a complicated issue. I think my main thing with Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes is that it groups all this stuff together with the idea that, okay, we were getting sort of a more accurate representation by averaging out every reviewer's score. That's somehow better. But I think the problem, or at least one of the problems, is that having these sites also lets the reviewers be more aware of what the score is, what everybody else is saying. It becomes a bit of a groupthink thing, and like people just kind of, whether they mean to or not, are buying into the quote unquote critical wave.
I do want to say though, I think Metacritics for games are more accurate than for films, and my reasoning for this would be kind of by counterpoint. Can you think of a game that got like a 4 or 5 or even a 6 Metacritic that we all loved or thought it was like a masterpiece game that just got completely ruined by Metacritic scores? The only one I can think of is The Order, that I think was like super unfairly punished for its length, but they're pretty accurate Metacritic scores for games. I can't think of any that were like, wow, the Metacritic for that is off. Whereas there's movies that get rotten all the time that I think are amazing, genuinely. So it's just way less subjective when it comes to games.
I mean, I don't like, I am all for critics. Like if the story sucks and all the gameplay mechanics are great, but somehow the story didn't work for them or whatever, and they want to penalize it for that, and that's their personal opinion, I'm fine with that. Like, I'm not as big into the like scientific objectivity of game reviews, but like, I do know what you're saying. And I do think like, to me, it's more like, there's games that are 6s and 7s that end up becoming cult classics that people love, but a lot of people miss because they're just under the radar. They're not necessarily like destroyed, but they're just kind of like, oh, everybody thinks they're mediocre, when eventually they build a following.
Yeah, 100%. The crime is like, if you're not an 8 or higher, that's like a filtering point. The filtering point's the problem, not the Metacritic itself. And I think people should be a little more open to games that are 7s. There's always interesting mechanics and ideas for the most part. I remember playing that shitty Pirates of the Caribbean 3 game for Xbox 360, and it had a really, like, just for achievements, and it had a really cool like dueling system. It wasn't a great game, but it had good ideas. Especially game developers and aspiring game developers should try lots of games, even shit ones, because there are good ideas in shit games as well.
Now, for the films, do they let other like random people review films like they do games on Metacritic? Do you know?
No, there's like a critic and user score for sure. They're separated like games.
Yeah, but you know how like YouTubers and stuff are probably listed as critics that have their Metacritic score. I don't think it's just websites anymore. I think other people probably get on there as well.
Yeah, now, Rotten Tomatoes, you do have to be a approved critic to some degree. Usually you have to have some kind of accreditation, I believe. But I mean, Metacritic does have a movie site section as well. I feel like people don't look at that as much as Rotten Tomatoes, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what their policy is.
There has to be accreditation for Metacritic. Otherwise, people would just be review bombing it and signing up to be a reviewer.
Yeah, but I guess that you mentioned YouTubers though, and that's an interesting point in terms of like, I don't know, are people looking at Metacritic scores? Because I think a lot of people have, some streamers or YouTubers that they like, that they follow, they kind of trust their opinions. And if they play a game and seem to like it, that might actually become, or is maybe starting to become, a bigger impact than a Metacritic score. And maybe we're off base on this. I don't know for sure, but that's definitely a newer thing that's starting to happen more. So,
yeah, definitely. I just was looking at the Metacritic site actually, and they have on the main page for games, they have new to Game Pass and new to PS Plus sections, which is kind of interesting. Obviously, a lot of people are trying those games if they think it's worthwhile to put those games on their homepage there. So, I mean, it makes sense. If you're paying for the service, you might as well give them a try.
Yeah.
And I think generally another good thing that isn't necessarily true with movie reviewers is I would hope most, at least for big releases, most reviews are given to someone on a team. Like it's not like a film review where you can literally watch almost every movie. These games are too long, so people get assigned certain games. I think they generally assign them to people who are familiar with the genre and other games similar to it, or like those kind of games for the most part. There's been exceptions to that, but you're getting a little more accurate representation. But what it can happen is, especially for experimental stuff like Embers of Miram, I remember we got Destructoid, eventually reviewed it, and they gave it a 6, and it was mostly because they just didn't like our main mechanic, which was like a twin stick kind of thing. And if you do risky mechanics, that's definitely a pro and a con, and you'll see the largest standard deviations in experimental games. So experimental games are tough. It might be for you and it might not. And that's a risk every developer kind of has to factor in.
Well, you want to see a range, go look at Citizens of Earth there.
Yeah.
That was not an experimental game. People just either hated it or loved it. But yeah, I think it is interesting that there is that sort of like personal touch to the reviewers. I'm sure it's the same for movies. I just feel for movies, because it's so short and there's no variability to it, right? Like you are watching the same thing that the guy beside you watched. Whereas with games, you could in theory have a completely different experience than someone else playing the exact same title. And like Red Dead Redemption 2, you could have 180-hour experience, or you could have a 10-hour experience and then give up on it, kind of thing. So, I mean, drastically different. So, I mean, it makes sense that scores can kind of be all over the place. And I think by having so many people, not just, the quote unquote like mainstream game development sites or game journalist sites, you get a bigger range of those, and I think it probably gives you a more accurate kind of like average score, which is probably why I think it's helpful too. But I do think people focus on it too much for sure. You should also like look at games you're interested in, and if there's like I'm still interested in Outlaws. I'm sure the score's not that good for that game, but I want to give it a try. And you should probably look at games you like, not exclusively their scores.
Yeah.
Using a library. Come on, use a library. Try it out.
Yeah. I would say definitely like you need to, like, if there's a game coming out in a genre you like, that, Metacritic scores maybe aren't as important as, well, this is a genre you're into, so you probably know best. But like, I think I read something recently from the developer of Immortals of Avium as well. And they were kind of like, it was like a postmortem of why that game didn't do better. And they brought up the reviewer thing, where it's like, if it's a known franchise, they usually assign a reviewer who's into that franchise, who's familiar with it, but nobody really knew what that game was. And I think they said in some cases, like, it's a shooter, but some people who were reviewing it didn't like shooters. So it's like right off the bat, you're kind of screwed.
And you have an EA logo on your game as well, which
huge
affects things. And it's just, the biases are there 100%. It's undeniable. But, to get back to the core idea with Suda. It probably is too much of developers paying attention or publishers to scores, and that's where games become boring and generic. I remember talking about an article when Spider-Man came out even, and it was on CNET. Spider-Man, they called, excuse me, video game : the video game, where all the AAA kind of Sony games have a similar map, crafting system, skill trees, and they start to look like each other the same way a lot of Ubisoft games do as well. So that is a problem. I think Sony's pretty good at having each game stand out with their own mechanics and ideas and story. But that's another factor. I don't care about story. So someone might give a game that with great gameplay an 8 because of story problems, and I'm like, I could care less. So as with everything, you kind of just got to do your own digging and research, and ideally find a reviewer, like an individual reviewer that you can trust, which is hard to do with games. And the best amalgamated reviews to me used to be game trailers, which no longer exists. I thought 100%. They were the most fair, did not punish a game too harshly for being unoriginal, did not lean to certain publishers or developers. I thought they were by far the most fair review platform, and I have not found a platform that kind of replaced game trailers for me.
Yeah, one other little point that comes to mind, and I don't know if this still applies or not, but 10, 15 years ago, when we were working together at Silicon Knights, it was a part of I believe part of a publisher agreement where it was like, if you had a Metacritic score over a certain number, you would get a bonus. And it was kind of like how is that fair to end? Like, it just, I guess it's supposed to motivate the developers to do a better job, but like, there's so much that's out of their control. It's kind of crazy.
I think it's kind of fair. I think Metacritic scores are generally fair.
Well, I mean, I think in terms of the bonus, why wouldn't the bonus be based off of sales?
Yeah, I agree. There's a very high correlation between Metacritic and sales.
Yeah, I guess that's the assumption, is high Metacritic means better sales.
And I think, if anything, they would argue a Metacritic is more fair to the developer. Like, if I was a developer, I would want it based, you'd like it based on both, but ideally, a game with a high Metacritic might not sell well. We've seen that happen time and time again. So it's saying, like, if critics say the game is good, it might not necessarily lead to sales, but we'll still say, hey, you did a good job. So I think that, yeah, it would be the case for Metacritic instead of sales numbers, where I don't think the reverse is very true.
Yeah, this is kind of getting away from Metacritic, but a lot of the deals I've seen are usually once we recoup our cost, the rev share is let's say 70-30 or whatever, or 50-50. Let's say 50-50. Then once we recoup, once we make another $1 million, then it goes to 60-40 developer. And then if you do 2 million, it goes even better for the developer. So you are rewarded in that case for selling more, having better sales. And it is like a sliding scale. So you'd think if the Metacritic was higher, if the Metacritic was a high thing and then you get a big bonus, it may not be as good as just getting that long tail of stuff. Whereas the Metacritic could be a hard no, but the game over time could sell great and still, give you a good payback. But if it's only based on Metacritic score, then you could get really screwed in a deal.
Yeah. Could help you, could screw you, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we could probably go back and forth on this topic all day. We've juiced it. Let us know if we missed any very important observations or succeedings or failings of the Metacritic system in the comments. youtube.com/Game Junk. Discord links are there as well if you want to discuss this topic on the Discord. Okay, moving on. Unity rolling back a pricing model, which was already a rollback of a previous pricing model that was very controversial. Generally, I think a lot of indie developers have been moving to Unreal. That's kind of I don't think that's a secret or a shock to anyone in the industry.
Yeah, or Godot.
Yeah. So Unity probably was feeling the stress of that. And to be honest, like, I don't know who is making these decisions at Unity. I know they got rid of Nicotero, right? Was that?
Yeah, Riccatello.
Riccatello. And since then, I don't know, like Unity has been pretty stagnant in the news. So I don't know.
Yeah, they haven't said much. So this news was pretty much saying that they are going to cancel some of the fees that Riccatello said they were going to incorporate. I don't know if this article that we were talking about, but it was saying that, the new CEO had gone and talked to a bunch of the Unity partners and tried to figure out kind of like what was the matter essentially. And I personally think it kind of ties into another article, which I forgot to mention to you guys before the show, but it kind of ties into the fact that once Unity went public, they're kind of then forced to just make money. And you can't just not make money as a public company. Like, that is your, what do they call it? Fiduciary duty or whatever, is to make money for your shareholders, right? They own you essentially, and you have to make them money. So the same thing is happening right now with Ubisoft. I don't know if you saw any of these articles. I forgot to bring it up, but basically like one of the shareholders that owns like 1% of the company is like trying to convince them to go private again, to actually reclaim the stock and take Ubisoft private. Because I think this whole needing to make money is also starting to hit Ubisoft, where they're just grinding out kind of the same game over and over again. And it's a little different because Ubisoft's a game company and their headcount is huge. I think they're like 19,000 people. But then Unity, as really like you were saying, Frank, just not made any big gains to get back what they lost from those poor announcements that they made before that really pissed off the community. Like, from my personal standpoint, I don't get any cold call emails asking people to port their Unity games to platforms anymore. Like, very rare. So, but I do sometimes get Unreal now, and much more. And a lot of people I talk to are switching to Unreal. And I mean, when Unreal went free and then Unity tried to nickel and dime everybody, like, obviously it's going to turn people off, especially that whole retroactive, we're gonna put this fee on everybody kind of thing that has ever had a game launched on any platform. I think was really detrimental. And this sort of is them trying to roll it back, but in this whole thing of like, oh yeah, we're doing a great job, we're rolling back this fee, they also jacked up fees on developers. The like base pro and enterprise versions, are getting like a pretty substantial price increase. Pro going up 8%, enterprise going up 25%. So they're really trying, they still have to make that money somehow. And so now they're going to milk the developers and ideally the big companies that make it. So this will be all the mobile companies, Kabam, EA, Blizzard, all those companies that might use Unity. I don't know if they all use Unity, but it's going to be a big hit. It's going to be tough to make a good case for it when Unreal is so powerful, and Godot's coming up as like a very viable mobile option in place of Unity, because Unity's market was a lot of the mobile space, because Unreal couldn't really do it, and now Godot is kind of starting to eat into that. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. But I haven't heard any rumblings of people being forgiving of Unity because they're rolling back this fee. So I don't see this as turning the tide back in Unity's favor. I think maybe the damage has been done. They're going to have to really do some heavy lifting to get back their audience, I think. Really, either if that's technology or monetary reduction of fees. I'm not sure what it is, but probably both, to be honest.
Yeah, so I don't know too much of the details, like what it is. They're canceling that runtime fee, which to me seemed like it was just a very hard thing for developers to know how much that was ultimately going to cost them, right?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Prices are going up in terms of the subscriptions, but at least people can look and see this is how much we have to pay Unity exactly until, maybe we hit another bracket and then we got to switch to a different license and then we pay more. So I think that's the advantage, is that at least they're being clear and open with people, and people don't feel like they're, going to wake up one morning and just suddenly owe all this money they didn't know they were going to owe. But yeah, prices are still going up, and there is still a free, personal is still free. And I think they said the ceiling for what qualifies you for that license has gone up a bit, from 100,000 to 200,000 US.
Yeah.
So that's the only kind of olive branch kind of like, okay, we'll do something for at least some of the smaller developers who were maybe concerned, but the bigger developers are definitely paying more money.
Yeah. On that note about the runtime fee being like hard to calculate, I mean, it's different when you're paying like a set percentage based on sales, like Unreal does, and what Unity used to do, I think. But then when you added this runtime fee that's like per install, it's just so nebulous. Like, if I download it 5 times, am I paying 5 times for it? Like, that seems like what they were implying was going to happen, which seems ridiculous, to be honest. And this just leaves, if that is the case, imagine if people found out EA had a Unity game, what would stop them from just deleting, installing just to fuck EA? Like, it seems crazy.
Yeah,
you could essentially money bomb the developers.
I still think there was confusion about, and this is part due to Unity's ambiguity about how that fee system was going to work. So
yes,
we didn't even really get a chance to see how that would have played out, because immediately it was pretty much boycott city with that. So I don't know. In terms of Unity, I haven't used it to make a new game in a while, just kind of work with existing projects. And it feels to me like when they went public, they shifted more to like, we want people to use this for filmmaking and like visualization software and everything. We want this to be an engine for everything rather than an engine for games. And I think it's kind of suffered as a result. So unless they kind of get back to that model of like making an engine for games in a specific type of game, probably, I think they're going to be playing catch up for a while.
Yeah, definitely.
But hey, Unreal played catch up for a while too. They were in the shit house with developers for a while. So, a bold
move. That's a little different though. I think, I mean, it wasn't because the engine was shit. It was because the money was too much for platforms. So it was more that people couldn't afford it rather than that people were pissed off with the fees they were imposing on them.
That's true, but I could still see a third party having like ease of use partnered with a pricing model that works and taking some of that market share. But Unreal's got a lot of money going for it from Fortnite to improve the engine, and the
Epic Store,
or the Fortnite engine too is like for education stuff. They are having young people learn on a simplified version of Unreal to make Fortnite add-ons and mods, and then now they'll already have some exposure, and it's going to be tough to beat Unreal in the future, would be my guess.
Oh yeah.
All right, time to move on to what we played. Is there anything else we needed to cover?
Nope.
Okay. Huck, do you want to go first? You weren't here last week.
Sure. Yeah. So while I was on my trip, I took my iPad and I did some Xbox streaming on it. Worked really great. And I played pretty much exclusively Sea of Stars. I got back into that game, and I played for maybe 3 or 4 hours or so, and that game is surprisingly long, I think, to be honest. And I don't know how long I'm in it, maybe like 8 hours or 9 hours now. I feel like I barely scratched the surface. I think I'm only at like level 8 or something. It's almost like a level an hour, which seems kind of crazy for an RPG. I am still enjoying the mechanics though, and I just got to the point where I got another character. So they're kind of switching it up that way and giving more options. And I still think the battle mechanics of being able to break the enemy sort of like attack patterns based on the moves you do, and you have to like strategically choose your moves and make sure you have enough MP and stuff, is really great. I think it's well done. I do think the battles are a little slow. It'd be nice if it was a little more natural of what to do, but I don't know if that's just through too much animations playing or just me taking it too much time to think about what to do. But I did actually, through the streaming, nothing against the game, I don't think, but twice it kind of I guess it crashed or something. Like the game just froze on my screen for like a few minutes, and then it just said could not connect anymore. So I don't know if something happened in the back end side or with the internet dropped or something like that. But luckily, Sea of Stars has a fairly generous save, so I didn't lose too much progress. But yeah, I thought it worked surprisingly well. I couldn't, on my iPad, it was still pretty good resolution. There was a couple times where I could see the kind of frames drop and it got a little pixelated. But for the most part, it seemed very responsive. I was able to do those moves where you need to, the timing based moves where you need to like knock stuff as they come to you kind of thing. And I was able to do it pretty successfully. So overall, I was pretty impressed with the streaming, and it was on hotel Wi-Fi. So, it's not going to be the best. But yeah, so I played that. I was enjoying it. I'll probably try to keep going on it. I'm really trying to address some major backlog games I have on my list, but I should really not be doing that because I have like Rebirth and all these other monster games to get to. But you know what? I'm trying to go with the flow of what I feel like playing in the moment, and that was the game that came up. So I'll pass it off to someone else.
Yeah, I feel you with going with the flow. I've been wanting to play Vampire Survivors again. Been playing that. Went back, and I'm trying to do a story mission a day on Horizon Zero Dawn to get me into Forbidden West again. Don't have much to say yet, but I'll just say I finally platinumed Cat Quest 2, and I've started Cat Quest 3. I'm the last to the party on this one. And I have to say, I think I like Cat Quest 1 a lot more than Cat Quest 2. I find the two characters set up very cumbersome, and like equipping things on two and switching between them. And I think the difficulty scaled too much with the cat and the dog, even though I like the idea of it. It just made something that's supposed to be a stripped down, simple experience more complicated than it needed to be. So I really preferred Cat Quest 1, but it seems like they might have had similar thoughts with Cat Quest 2 because it's all single player again. If you want to switch, basically, I think Huck had mentioned this with the Cat Quest 3 when you guys talked about it. In that one, you would have a ranged and a melee. And now, rather than switching between characters, you just switch weapons, which I think is a much better system. And I am a little upset that they got rid of the map, like how it's not the zoom out of the actual level, where it's like an illustrated map. That was kind of the hook to this game for me. So I'm really shocked with that decision, to be honest. But I am liking it, and I like the caves. They're a little more intricate, and the graphics are great. So it's actually, I thought after 2, I'm like, I'm not going to play 3. I just did what I always do, play the previous game and burn myself out. But
yeah,
it's actually the opposite. 3 had me like, oh, this is the Cat Quest I wanted to play. And so it's kind of hooked me back in again.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it. I did platinum Cat Quest 3, so nice. I'm fully done with it.
Well, now you have the PS4 version or PS5, the opposite of whichever one you played. You can platinum it twice.
I think I'm okay with just platinum it once.
No comment. So okay, I want to touch on Astro Bot. Still playing it. I assume we'll probably do a group review at some point in the near future. I'm definitely getting close to the end of the main, like I'm on the final world. I wanted to mention the blowing mechanic came up
in the game.
What's that?
You only blow once in the entire game.
Not the case, but there was some discussion on the Discord with people confused about that because the experience can differ depending on if you have your microphone muted or not. So I have confirmed, and I've seen it in multiple levels. Basically, if there's a pinwheel thing, that is intended to be a blowing mechanic. But if you have your microphone muted, it will just automatically do it for you. So you don't even have to do anything.
No, it doesn't. The pinwheels. Okay. So the pinwheels show up in the ghost level in something
With the
like maybe
candles.
3 or 4 of those. Yeah. It's not a major mechanic. In every level in Donkey Kong, you had to blow something to find a hidden collectible.
Yeah. But, again, people were questioning, and I was like, am I losing my mind? Like, I swear I was blowing things in this game.
Makes sense. My microphone is muted, and if you don't know this, people, you got to be aware. When you get trophies and stuff like that, by default, your mic is on. It's recording videos. You're being watched and documented by Big Brother. Make sure you disable that in your trophies. How have we never done a PSA on this?
See, I like that aspect. That's why I leave my microphone unmuted. I want to know in the moment what sounds I was making.
You don't want to know the sounds I'm making when I'm popping trophies. So if anyone doesn't know that, you got to shut that down. I've told some people and they were very surprised.
Yeah, I mean, because there's a light on the controller that lights up if it's muted, but you can have that by default. That's a setting you can choose. So good to know for sure. And blowing is mostly optional in Astro Bot.
But I've also been playing it. I'm done all the first 4 galaxies. I do everything in each galaxy as it comes up. So they have been 3 and 4 elevated the game in a big way. 1 and 2 were, it makes sense, pretty accessible, not that challenging. 3 and 4, I wouldn't say hard, but a little more variety and some really cool ideas. And the bosses are so good. I want them to be longer. The bosses are too short. So I'm assuming a boss attack mode will be coming in the future or something like that. I cannot get over how good the bosses are in this game.
So is it a pure Mario ripoff, or
they have some
initial stuff or unique stuff in it?
Yeah, there's a video on the I think it's Game Maker's Toolkit with this kind of I can't remember the name of the designer who worked on Galaxy 2 and then 3D World, and how they introduce mechanics, especially for the challenge levels. It's following that specific design pattern philosophy. Which is tried and true. It works great for platformers. So I've always said Sony is absolutely the best at ripping things off and making them better. So we'll see if that's the case at the end of this year. I think they've got number 1 and 2 game of the year. Actually, I think they got top 3 game of the year so far.
Yeah, it's looking that way.
Rebirth's an exclusive.
Yeah. I was going to ask, did you try any of the challenge levels yet, Frank?
No, I'm kind of saving those. I did the first 2 levels and then I'm saving the rest.
Okay. They are significantly more challenging. I will say that. So anybody who kind of played through the main game and just thought, oh, this is too easy, there is stuff there. And I'm to the point where I'm in World 4 looking at them kind of thinking, I don't know if I'm going to do, I don't want to try and go through this. This is too much for me, but be curious to hear what you think.
Which was kind of how Wonder worked as well. Wonder was super simple, and then I had the most fun in the challenge levels, so I assume the same will happen.
Yeah.
I have, in my same vein of going back and playing things, I haven't finished. I played Yakuza Kiwami #1, which is a remake of the first game and technically the second game in the timeline. So I finished Yakuza 0 a couple of years ago, and I decided it's time to return to the world of Yakuza. And it's surprisingly similar to Yakuza 0 so far. It's basically the town is very similar to what I remember. I mean, they probably use the exact same assets. So it feels very familiar. It's easy to jump into. The mechanics are all pretty straightforward. So far, I'm just in the basic fighting stuff. I'm sure it's going to be pretty much the same thing I remember from Yakuza 0. And it's it's just fun. It's like a neat, fun little story. Like, Yakuza, gangster, mafia kind of guys. And I'm liking it so far. The characters are over the top, weird at times, and I just love it. I think it's so funny and so fun of a game, like just a fun game. Probably one of those games that doesn't have a great high Metacritic score, but is really fun. I'm not very far into it though, but
I don't know if you were planning on talking about this, but did you ever talk about Mafia? Didn't you play through?
I was going to bring it up next.
Oh, okay. Because
as another game. So I could go now, or I could wait for you guys to circle back around.
Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, Mafia came to Game Pass, and I never played it, and I was like, I'm kind of in the mood for an open world game. I had no real idea what this game was or what to expect, and I was just in love with this game. I think I beat it in like 2 or 3 days, I think, and it's short. Yeah, it's like it's a 10-hour game, maybe tops, and it's just no side quests, all main quest missions, and you basically just drive around the open world. You go from point A to point B. You do Grand Theft Auto kind of type stuff, but you're in whatever 1920s or whatever the kind of remind me of like the LA noir kind of timeline, except you're in kind of like some fantasy Chicago type city. One thing they did, which I don't recall happening in other games, is that when you are set a waypoint and you're approaching an intersection, they don't have a mini map on the screen, from what I recall, or maybe they do. But they put in the world at the intersection a little turn signal of which way you're supposed to turn. So there's no like breadcrumb on the road. You just kind of look for the turn signals, and okay, I got to turn right here. And it's really great because I don't have to constantly be looking at the mini map to know where to go, which always distracts me. And I always end up, hitting a pedestrian or something as I'm kind of looking away. So now you can just kind of like look at the road and just know that you're going to get the directions. It's kind of like having the Alexa or whatever, the Siri, kind of just giving you the directions as you're driving. And I really like that. The world itself is not very big. It pretty much is contained to maybe, I don't know, a 5-kilometer square area. And then there's a few areas kind of like off to the side that you occasionally have to go to. And I just love the fact that it was so compact. The gameplay was fine. It didn't do anything special. This is the definitive edition, so I guess they kind of remade the first game. But it was great. And after I played it, I went looking for Mafia 2 and 3. And in a sale just for me, quote unquote, which I don't know if that's true or not, but the whole Mafia trilogy was like $10 Canadian. So I ended up buying the whole thing. And I haven't started 2 or 3 yet, but I really, really liked Mafia 1, and I had never really had a inkling of that it was this good. So if you're looking for, a small open world game, I would highly, highly recommend Mafia to take a look, especially now that it's on Game Pass.
Interesting. Yeah, but the Discord was a little abuzz with this game as well. So,
was it? Yeah, I've been kind of out of the Discord loop. I haven't been checking it because I've been away. Have you guys played this game before?
No, I've never played a Mafia game ever.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Check it out.
When I think of this game, I think of the Godfather game. I feel like that came out maybe around the same time.
Yes, I bet it did.
That a bit, but no, never played Mafia.
I highly recommend it. What's that?
I've wish listed the trilogy on PSN. We'll see when it goes on sale.
Yeah.
Nice. I don't have anything else. That's pretty much it for me. So, Sean, anything else for you?
Yeah, I'll just give a quick mention. I haven't played too much of this yet, but I picked up Crypt Custodian, which is the new game from the guy who made Islets. Just single developer, I guess. I think just him, and I think his brother does the music or something. But it is, I guess, technically a Metroidvania, but it's like, this is more top down, so feels a little more like Zelda. And the theme of it is like you're a cat that has died, and you're in the afterlife, and you basically can either go to heaven or kind of get stuck being a janitor or custodian. And through kind of a comedic thing that happens, you end up with the janitor gig. But so far, like there's some decent combat, and that's about it. Like some light puzzling, I guess, but I haven't got a full sense of what the story is yet. And I guess the one game that kind of came to mind was Death's Door, but like I think it's definitely a little bit more casual than Death's Door, but just in terms of theme and sort of the feel of it, it was kind of reminding me of that a bit. So, but I really like the art style, and I liked Islets quite a bit. So, I'm going to keep playing this and see how it goes.
Cool. I was not aware of this, and it's on all platforms, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
On all major consoles, where Islets was not on PlayStation. So neat. Huck, anything else for you?
Nope.
Okay.
Nothing else.
All right, so that'll wrap up this week's show. Next week, I don't think there's any major releases. We'll see if there's any news or...
Well, Plucky Squire's out.
Oh, shit.
So maybe we'll be talking about that.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that for sure. There's too many games. And I'm really excited for that. So that is good news. It sounded like I was disappointed. I'm not. I'm excited for that game. So we will have the scoop on the Plucky Squire for sure. And just a reminder, it's coming to PlayStation Plus Premium, I believe. So if you have that, don't pay for it. I'm going to pay for it just for fun. Support the developers. All right. Thanks for watching or listening. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.